Hey everyone, Tactics here with more 10.2 info. There's been just a massive dump of new things coming out throughout the day today, and in this video we're going to be talking about tier set bonuses, specifically the tank tier sets, as that is my main role. Now the PTR is also up now, and these tier sets are all available for testing, so I've been playing around with them a bit here, so hopefully I can give you some insight into how the set bonuses are actually functioning and kind of where their power level is currently. Just do kind of keep in mind this is the very first PTR iteration of these set bonuses, so everything here is subject to change and likely will change. And if you remember back to the 10.1 PTR, there were some total reworks of set bonuses back then, so don't lose hope if you're not a big fan of your current set bonus. Before hopping into the actual set bonuses though, I did actually want to briefly touch on some Revival Catalyst news that we got after my previous video was posted, and that is it will actually be available from day one of the season, with the caveat that charges are now going to be acquired every 2 weeks instead of every single week. Overall, though, I think this is still a massive win, both for more casual players as well as Mythic Plus only players that don't really raid. Basically, kind of look and map out what this means. With this new system, if you raid either 0 times, you just never get a tier drop from raid, and if you never get a tier piece from your Great Vault, and assuming that you still get a tier piece from the KSM achievement, so that's 1 tier piece you get, basically you now will gain your 3 tier pieces from the Revival Catalyst by week 5, as you get it on week 1, 3, and 5. So at the beginning of week 5, you'll have your 4 piece, whereas if you look at the old system, the old Catalyst wasn't even open until week 6 of the patch. So massive timeline update for those kinds of players, and even for everyone else, it just makes it a little bit easier to acquire your 4 piece earlier in the patch. So really positive change here. Super happy with that. Now that's out of the way though, let's talk tier sets. Starting out alphabetical order here, I guess we're doing Blood DK. So right off the top here, 2 set, consuming a bone shield charge has a chance to cause your next heart strike to apply Ashen Decay. This reduces the damage dealt to you by 10% and increases your damage dealt to the target by 20% for 8 seconds. Now this is another tier set based on consuming a bone shield charge, which means outside of your own personal cooldown to consume it with Tombstone, you really have to be tanking something to get the value out of this, right? So little downside there in raid environments, particularly when you're not always tanking, can hurt your uptime of this Ashen Decay buff, so something to note there. In terms of the overall proc rate, when you are actually consuming the Bone Shield charge, it seems to be somewhere in like the 1.5 to 2 procs per minute, potentially hasted, not totally sure. And in terms of the application, when you do Heart Strike, it will apply to all targets hit by your Heart Strike. So if you are cleaving in a Death and Decay, it's going to go into all those targets. So really nice there. The 4 piece here adds some quality of life to actually maintaining that Ashen Decay debuff, as Soul Reaper's execute damage as well as A-Bomb Limbs damage will now also apply that Ashen Decay debuff to targets, and your Heart Strike and Blood Boil damage will extend it by a second. So this gives you better uptime in all scenarios. It gives you 100% uptime easily in execute if you are running Soul Reaper. So obviously that's a big boost to the value of Soul Reaper, particularly in single target situations. And then obviously like on pull with A-Bomb's Limb, or if you're doing pulls in Mythic Plus on packs with A-Bomb's Limb up, you're going to easily spread that out just ASAP. So that's really nice there, just nice quality of life. I wonder if this does bump up Soul Reaper's values in Mythic Plus such that you'd run it there. Not totally sure about that, but it seems like it's going to be a very strong option, at least in single target scenarios, which is cool because it's not really something Blood DKs have run so far in Dragonflight, I don't believe. Overall, I do think this is actually a pretty powerful tier set bonus. It's definitely better than the one they currently have, which is nice. So it's definitely a good way to start off the tier set bonuses here. So let's move down. Next up on the list, Vengeance Demon Hunter. Not as positive as a reaction we're going to get here. So currently Vengeance has maybe the strongest tier set of all tank specs. I'm sure you can make an argument for Guardian Druid as well, but I think Vengeance is the best just in terms of raw power and what it makes the spec do. This one, less so for sure. You see here it's kind of based around Sigil of Flame. This first one here, you get a little bit of extra soul fragments. This does scale into AoE, so you can get, multiple procs off multiple targets hit. And the Fury spent, reducing the cooldown. It kind of depends. It's like a 5-10 second CD off of your sigil here, so you get it down a little bit. So it's not terrible, but it definitely doesn't feel the greatest, especially coming from the current tier set. Looking at the 4-piece here, when you attack a target afflicted by your sigil of flame, your damage and healing are increased by 2% and your max health is increased by 2% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5. This would be nice if it was 100% uptime, but it's not. It's not really close to 100% uptime, really. I think even if you like best case scenario it, you have like a 40% uptime of the 5 stack, specifically the 5 stack, and then maybe like I think 30% of a lower stack count in general. And again, that's a best case scenario, so really not super ideal. It's not like this set bonus is terrible, but definitely when you're coming from having an extremely powerful set bonus, it feels bad to get one that's kind of on the lower end, I would say. So I think Vengeance Demon Hunter's probably hoping for some decent buffs, or maybe even a rework to this one here. Moving down, next up, we've got Guardian Druids, like I mentioned, the other tank that has the kind of really, really powerful current tier set. And so it can feel a little bit bad if that doesn't come out, their next one doesn't come out to be as powerful. Looking at the 2-piece here, 20% of your damage and healing and 100% of the armor you gain while Rage of the Sleeper is active fuels the growth of Dream Thorns, which wreathe you in protection after Rage of the Sleeper expires, absorbing 10% of the damage dealt to you while the thorns remain. Now, this is very convoluted. I will not disagree with that. Basically, what this means is when you have Rage of the Sleeper up, when you deal damage, you heal, not absorbs, or Sox Fury does not count. And when you press Iron Fur, which with current gear is about 10k armor, that will kind of build into this this bubble amount, and then when Rage of the Sleeper expires, you gain an absorb shield for that amount, and this kind of functions like Ignore Pain, where your damage intake, it'll take 10% of that damage intake and subtract it from that bubble instead of your own health until it uses it all up. Now, some things we learned from testing on PTR, this bubble has a 30-second duration. So potentially in like big AoE situations, you might not actually be able to use up this entire shield, meaning you're going to lose value from both the 2-piece and the 4-piece here. So the 4-piece, each 40 rage you spend while Rage of the Sleeper is active extends its duration by 1 second up to 5. So this is a 10-second buff currently. You can extend it up to 15. And then your Dream Thorns become Blazing Thorns, causing damage absorbed to be reflected at the attacker. So again, you're going to lose out damage if you aren't able to use up your entire Dream Thorn within a 30-second duration. This is also kind of similar to the Blood DK tier set, right? Where you have to be actively tanking something to get full value from this tier set. So if you aren't tanking in a raid environment, it's going to lose value. In Mythic Plus, luckily, you're not going to lose too much value. However, you're really going to run into that issue I just mentioned, where you're going to make up this massive shield in AoE and potentially not even be able to actually use up that shield. As an example, I think I was able to get like a 5 million absorb shield. 5 million. If that's only taking 10% of your damage dealt, you have to take 50 million damage in 30 seconds somehow after your Rage of the Sleeper expires to get full value out of the tier set. And it's hard to do, trust me. That is hard to do. To put that in perspective, that's like a quarter of a current dungeon's worth of damage, or more than a full raid boss kind of thing, right? So it's definitely something that it seems nice in Mythic Plus until you put that 30-second timer on it, which is not ideal. It's definitely better in an AoE situation compared to single target. I think single target, it's a much smaller shield. You're getting anywhere from like 150 to like 300k-ish in like a pure single target scenario. And again, the way you're tanking a boss and want to use Rage of the Sleeper in a raid scenario could actually take value away from this tier set, right? If you're using Rage of the Sleeper on like a tank combo on like Rashok, for example, and the other tank ends up taking Rashok at the end of that combo, all of a sudden you get your absorb shield after Rage of the Sleeper expires, after the combo's done, and you're not even tanking anything, right? So it's going to be hit and miss depending on fight design and raids, and it's going to kind of depend on whether or not you can clear the shield in Mythic Plus. It does have some synergy, of course, with the armor talents. More armor means you're going to build a bigger shield here, but it also has counter synergy as well with Tooth and Claw, particularly when talking about this part of the 4-set bonus, the time duration. If you actually get Tooth and Claw procs, you potentially, in lower target count scenarios, again, not too much of a big deal in AoE because you can kind of spam Iron Fur and have that whole rage generation from Blood Frenzy. But in lower target count scenarios, when you're not fueled by that, Tooth and Claw procs can actually prevent you from getting the max benefit. So you won't get the 5-second extension because Tooth and Claw procs cost no rage. And all of a sudden, you don't actually have kind of the globals to use all that rage up unless you're trying to spam Iron Fur in single target, which usually isn't the best thing, I think, even for damage with this. I mean, it'll take some testing, but a bit of counter synergy there. And like I said, doesn't count Ursoc's Fury healing, the Absorb Shield in this 2-set bonus. So it's just actual raw healing and damage and the armor gained there from your Iron Fur. So something to keep in mind there. Overall, it's okay. It could be good in Mythic Plus. I think it's going to be bad in Raid. And honestly, if I had to guess, I don't think it's going to be that great in Mythic Plus either because of that 30-second duration. So hopefully they maybe make it extend until your next kind of Rage of the Sleeper, maybe something like that. I don't know, who knows, but I think 30 seconds is not enough. That's my opinion on that one. Moving on though, let's go. Next up we've got Paladin. Okay, Paladin. So the good news for Paladin, unlike Guardian, Druid, and Vengeance, their tier set currently sucks real bad. It would be impossible to get a tier set that's worse than the current one, so there is that. However, that doesn't mean you're going to be totally happy with this one. So, 2-piece here, Judgment grants a stack of Sanctification, increasing your armor by 1% per stack. Upon reaching 10 stacks, so 10% armor, your next cast of Consecration is empowered and increases its damage by 200% and healing by 200% if you're running that talent. Its radius gets a 30% boost, and you gain those 10 sanctification, there you go, stacks for the remainder of that 14-second consecrate, and then you reset it after that consecration ends, and you can start building stacks again for the 4-piece while you're within that empowered consecration. So for that 14-second duration, your abilities have a chance to deal 20% bonus damage or healing as fire healing. So 10 judgments is a lot. In my testing, it took ballparking 30 seconds. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, like 25 to 32 seconds, let's say, to actually build up this kind of 10 stack to get that empowered consecration. Though, of course, more haste will make this a little easier with the cooldown kind of reduction, that kind of thing. So it takes a bit of time to actually build this up, and then for that entire 14-second duration of the consecrate, you can't build stacks, right? So it's basically like a 45-ish second rotation where you're building for the first 2/3 of it, and then you're in it for the next third of it, and then you do it again, right? So it's like a 45-ish second rotation to make it nice numbers, right? I think the armor's pretty lackluster. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like I said, I'd rather have this armor every day of the week than the trickle healing from the current tier set. So there is that. But again, you're not going to be sitting at the max stacks all the time because you have to build it up from nothing. The tier set's also tied to Consecrate, which means that in a raid or dungeon environment, anything that makes you need to move out of your Consecrate means that you will lose that entire empowered Consecrate, because you cannot replace that empowered Consecrate. If you replace Consecrate when your empowered one is down, it gets rid of it entirely. It's gone. So you need to be very careful, because you can cut that buff short if you just kind of go on autopilot and it's like, oh, I have time to refresh my Consecrate 6 seconds early. Oh no, I just lost 6 seconds of my empowered Consecrate, right? So something to keep in mind. There's also, I would like there to be a more like Shadow Flamey Consecrate animation to know when you're in an empowered one. So that's a minor thing though. Would like to see that. The other thing, again, standing in Consecrate kind of sucks. 30% radius increase, not enough. I think it would be sick to see like a 100% radius increase. I don't know. Maybe that's crazy, but that would make this a lot better in my opinion. But also, I think 10 stacks is just a lot. The damage is not terrible. So specifically looking at the 4-piece, the fire from your damage abilities, in single target, I was getting this to be ballparking like 5%. And in AoE, it was closer to 10%. So pretty decent damage here. Again, better than the current tier set for sure. And that's not even considering the Consecrate damage increase, which scales really, really well into AoE, right? So damage is not bad, but again, tied to the Consecrate. So if you leave the Consecrate, if you accidentally replace your Consecrate during the buff timer, you lose the tier set benefit, right? So some things to keep in mind there. Definitely, potentially, maybe some changes that could be made. So yeah, it's not terrible. Definitely would like to see some improvements for sure, though. But I will take this over the current Prot tier set every day of the week for sure. Let's go down here. The next one we've got is Brewmaster. Now, I wasn't able to do much with the Brewmaster here, so maybe basing this a little bit more off community opinions of it. Off the top, Breath of Fire deals 20% bonus damage as Shadow Flame, causes you to heal for 50% of all fire damage dealt. Now, looking at logs here in Mythic Plus scenarios, when you're running Charred Passions, you're doing something like 25% of all your damage as fire, and that's going to go up with this tier set because it gives you a couple instances of Shadow Flame damage. So you're going to be healing for 50% of that, which is a lot of basically leech, essentially, which is pretty nice. At all times, you just get that leech, so that's going to be pretty nice too, especially again kind of synergizing with that stagger damage intake of Brewmaster, just kind of passively healing that up a little bit. The 4-piece though, it seems kind of crazy in like big AoE situations. So your attacks against targets afflicted by Breath of Fire have a chance to deal 5% extra damage as Shadow Flame, and each Celestial Brew also grants a stagger absorb equal to the amount of Shadow Flame damage you've dealt, causing damage delayed by stagger to instead be prevented. So that's an absorb that only applies to your stagger damage, which is pretty cool. I think that's really interesting. And this could be, again, kind of insane in big AoE when you've got Breath of Fire out on a ton of targets. You're spinning, you're popping off there. You get a lot of Shadow Flame procs. Boom, Celestial Brew does this massive personal absorb that gets eaten pretty quickly on a Brewmaster, but then you also have that massive stagger absorb now too, potentially, depending on how much Shadow Flame damage you did. So based on how that interaction is, I think this could be exceptionally powerful defensively for Brewmaster, and we all know how powerful Brewmaster already is offensively. They really needed the boost in the defense department, and that's not even saying like this set has offensive benefits too, right? It's not like it has none, but strictly focusing on the defense here, like this is going to be very powerful. And I think it's also kind of the most interesting tier set we kind of have so far among all the tanks, which is cool to see. So I think Brewmasters have got to be pretty happy with this tier set for sure. And that leaves us with, last but not least, Protection Warrior, which is definitely a bit more focused on single target compared to AoE. So you got the 2-piece. Spending Rage has a chance to cause your next shield slam to consume your bleeds on a target, instantly dealing 100% of the remaining damage and reducing the target's damage dealt to you by 10% for 5 seconds. So of course you've got Grievous wound, whatever it's called. You've got your Rend, and then you have the CD Thunderous Roar that are being applying bleeds. And so usually you'll have the 2 bleeds up that you'll be eating here. And this kind of feeds into the whole playstyle of Warrior anyways, because it's based on spending Rage. And that's kind of the whole thing, is you never really want to be capping Rage. So you get rewarded from this tier set by playing the class or spec correctly and well, which is always nice here. The proc rate on this seemed very high, and it was doing a lot of damage in pure single target. I will say, I think in a pure single target scenario, I was getting around 10 procs per minute, and it was dealing close to 25% of my overall damage in single target. So it was pumping. It was doing a ton of damage. It was kind of crazy. It does fall off in AoE because, of course, Shield Slam only hits 1 target. You have no way to do anything else in AoE, but because that single target was so high, it still does decent damage, even up to like 8 targets, right? It was doing like a few % of my damage in that scenario, so it's still not nothing in those scenarios, and it gives you big prio damage in Mythic Plus, which is kind of very nice coming from a tank. Again, considering how much damage that does, Prot Warriors are going to pump priority target damage in dungeons and blast in raids, assuming the damage or proc numbers don't change, which I have a feeling this will get a nerf, but if it doesn't, hey, Prot Warriors are going to absolutely blast. 4-piece here, when your bleeds are consumed on a target, their damage dealt to you is reduced by an additional 2% per bleed, so it's usually going to be 4%, sometimes 6 extra on top of the 10. You reset the cooldown of Thunderclap, And you get a 1-second CDR on Thunderous Roar here. So again, more strength in big AoE with that Thunderclap reset. Synergizes nicely with like Thunderlord and Booming Voice for more demo shout kind of CDR and extra rage generation. And the ballpark I was getting here again for Thunderous Roar was a little less than 10 seconds because we're getting about 10 procs per minute. Thunderous Roar with Uproar was a minute. So obviously that's going to be something you kind of want in maybe a Mythic Plus scenario. Potentially it's going to be much more appealing, but you have to give up something good to grab it, right? So if you're not running Uproar, it's going to be about 10 seconds of CDR. If you are running Uproar, maybe like 8. But still, definitely think out of this, the 2-piece is the more powerful part of the bonus, as this is basically where all the like major damage is, and the 4-piece is just kind of like a minor thing. So I definitely think, you know, Prot Warrior might be a little bit sleeper this tier. We'll have to see how everything goes with the rest of the PTR, but there we have it, guys. My first look at the 6 tank tier set bonuses. Overall, I would love to know what you guys think, though. Which one is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. Of course, coverage of the entire PTR cycle, including class adjustments, as well as raid and Mythic Plus testing, will continue here on this channel, with streams also happening over on my Twitch at Tactics, so be sure you guys do subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Otherwise, thank you so much to my Patreons for the support. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next video.